Hey there, folks. Welcome back to the channel. Picture this. You're hiding out in dense, unforgiving jungles, where every rustle could be an enemy, and your next meal is whatever you can catch or pluck from a tree. You're convinced the war's still raging, and your duty is to fight to the end. Meanwhile, the world's moved on. World War II ended decades ago. People are blasting off into space, rocking out to Elvis, and glued to TV screens. Sounds like a Hollywood blockbuster, right? But these are real stories of Japanese soldiers who became legends. Today, I'm diving deep, blending classic facts with fresh details I dug up, from bios and jokes to reflections on how propaganda can wreck lives. If you're into historical dramas that make you ponder human grit and folly, hit that subscribe button. Tons more stories like this are coming, and you won't want to miss them. Let's jump into this epic saga. Back in 2005, a wild story broke. Two Japanese soldiers were reportedly found in the jungles of Mindanao, a Philippine island, hiding out for 60 years since World War II ended. One, Lieutenant Yoshio Yamakawa, was 87. The other, Suzuki Nakachi, not Minoru Suzuki, as some mix-ups claimed, was 85. These guys served in Japan's 30th Infantry Division, landed on the island in 1944, and faced brutal American bombings. Ordered to wage guerrilla warfare in the jungles, they got left behind when their unit was hurriedly evacuated to Japan. The order came so fast that some, like these two, missed the boat and became accidental deserters. When word got out they'd been found, journalists swarmed the Philippines to gawk at these living fossils. The soldiers still feared returning home, terrified of facing a military tribunal. They had no clue how the world had changed, from atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki to the dawn of computers and cell phones. Crazy, right? It's like they were stuck in a time warp, living in 1945 while the world sped into the 21st century. Here's the twist. The 2005 story turned out to be shaky. I dug into it, and Japanese officials rushed to Mindanao to verify the claims. The story came from local intermediaries, hyping up Yamakawa from Osaka and Nakachi, supposedly from the 30th Division, found via a 93-year-old ex-soldier. But when officials arrived, the soldiers never showed. It might have been a hoax or a mix-up, maybe someone chasing clout or cash. Philippine authorities couldn't confirm it either, and the buzz fizzled out. Some sources call it a flat-out fake. Still, the idea wasn't far-fetched. After the war, tons of Japanese soldiers stayed stranded in the Philippines, surviving on berries, snakes, and stolen food. Could you imagine being that cut off from reality? Drop a comment below. What would you do if you stumbled across a story like this today? Even if the 2005 tale was dubious, other Japanese holdout stories are rock solid, backed by archives, memoirs, and eyewitness accounts. These soldiers, called stragglers or holdouts, kept hiding because they either missed Japan's 1945 surrender order or didn't buy it, thinking it was enemy propaganda. Their tales mix heroism, tragedy, and absurdity. Take 1960, when two soldiers, Masashi and Bunzo Minagawa, emerged from the jungles of Guam, a U.S. territory, 16 years after the war. It all started in late 1944 during the American assault on Guam. Ito and Minagawa lagged behind their unit, which got wiped out in an Australian ambush. They bolted into the jungle, surviving on an island spanning 541 square kilometers, over 54,000 hectares of dense forest and hills. How'd they pull it off? They ate anything that moved or grew. Berries, mushrooms, edible roots, small game from traps, even mice, grubs, and snakes. They boiled seawater to extract salt. Imagine simmering ocean water in makeshift pots. They'd raid local farms at night, snatching food. Sometimes they crossed paths with other scattered Japanese units, but no one knew the war was over. Hiroshima and Nagasaki had been bombed, Emperor Hirohito had surrendered, Japan was under US occupation. Local police and military hunted them for years, but no luck. These guys were ghosts, hiding in dugouts, whispering, using hand signals. Eventually, the authorities gave up. Their big break was stumbling on an American dump. Canned food, clothes, building materials, a survival jackpot. But in May 1960, things shifted. Minagawa went hunting and ran into two locals from Talafofo village, Vicente Manabuzan and Manuel Cruz Charfaro, chasing coconut crabs. Weak and starved, Minagawa surrendered. Minagawa spilled that Ito was still out there. The police organized a search, and Ito, realizing he couldn't make it alone, came out too. Before leaving, Minagawa dug up the bones of their fallen comrade, Ano, to return to his family. Their reunion with civilization was a media frenzy. Japan hailed them as heroes, but they were floored by the changes. Ito later wrote a book about his ordeal, and in 1961, a film about their story hit screens on Guam, sparking fresh searches for stragglers. Ito and Minagawa settled back home. Ito married, lived quietly, but always called those years a torturous fight to survive. Minagawa described the jungle as hell, battling hunger and loneliness daily. Imagine stepping out of that and seeing cars, TVs, and fashion trends. It's like time traveling from the Stone Age to the Space Age. Now, picture an even crazier story. Sergeant Shoichi Yokoi, who hid on Guam until 1972, 27 years after the war. Unlike Ito and Minagawa, Yokoi was a straight-up deserter. He couldn't handle the artillery hell of the 1944 American assault, so he fled deep into the island. Born in 1915 in Aichi Prefecture, Yokoi grew up on a poor farm, learning hard work early. Before the war, he was a tailor's apprentice, stitching clothes. Drafted in 1941, he served in Manchuria's 29th Division before landing on Guam. When the Americans took over, he hid with 9 others, but the group splintered. 3 died of starvation or disease, others scattered. Yokoi went solo, digging a cave-like dugout, reinforced with bamboo and leaves to stay invisible from the air. How'd he survive? Pure grit. He lived off rats, frogs, snakes, papayas, coconuts, and roots. A tailor by trade, he wove clothes from tree bark and made needles from animal bones. He avoided all contact to stay hidden. Locals spotted a ghost now and then, but couldn't catch him. Yokoi saw surrender leaflets but thought, American tricks. On January 24, 1972, while fishing, he bumped into 2 hunters, Jesus Duenas and Manuel de Gracia, who tied him up and turned him over. When told the war ended 27 years ago, Yokoi collapsed in tears. Hearing he'd fly home on a jet, he asked, "What's a jet plane?" That line became legendary. Talk about a guy who missed the entire aviation era. Back in Japan on February 2, 1972, Yokoi was a sensation. Crowds greeted him. He gave a press conference, saying, "I'm ashamed I came back alive," echoing the samurai code of bushido where surrender was dishonor. But 1970s Japan was worlds apart. Economic boom, peace vibes. Yokoi married Mihoko Hatano that year, wrote a memoir, Tomorrow, 1974, detailing his survival. He ran for parliament in 1974 as an independent but lost with just 2.6% of votes. He opened a museum on Guam in 1974, showcasing his dugout and gear, then returned to Japan. He died September 22, 1997, from a heart attack at 82. His story inspired books, films, and internet jokes. Yokoi would have owned Survivor without cameras. Or, he came out thinking dial-up internet was a US plot. It's funny but sad. 28 years in the jungle, all for a lost cause. Now, brace for the wildest tale. Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, who hid on Lubang, a Philippine island, until 1974, nearly 30 years after the war. Born March 19, 1922, in Kamekawa village, Honshu, to a teacher and doctor, Onoda was a go-getter. Played baseball, practiced kendo. In 1939, he worked in China for a trading firm but was drafted in 1942. Trained at the elite Nakano School for espionage and guerrilla tactics, he landed on the Philippines in December 1944 to run covert ops. Promoted to second lieutenant in January 1945, he reached Lubang and urged his commanders to prep for a long defense. They ignored him and the Americans crushed the Japanese forces. Onoda fled to the jungle with 3 men, Corporal Shoichi Shimada, Privates Kenshichi Kozuka, and Yuichi Akatsu, setting up a guerrilla base. On September 2nd, 1945, Japan surrendered, but planes dropped leaflets over their mountain ordering surrender. Onoda scoffed, "Enemy propaganda." Nakano had drilled him on disinformation. They bowed to the rising sun, vowing to fight on. More leaflets came. Ex-soldiers shouted through megaphones in the jungle, "Come out!" They didn't buy it, thought the enemy coerced POWs. Years passed. They roamed the island, sleeping in a tiny tent, soaked in the July to October rainy season, skin pale and wrinkled. Each had a rifle, 2 grenades, a pistol, about 2,000 rounds, and a 6-month rice stash. They stretched food, feared locals who'd sided with the US spotting villagers. They fired warning shots and bolted. They built a circuit of camps, staying 3 to 5 days each, looping every 1 to 2 months depending on food. They stole from farmers, hunted boars, chickens, iguanas, but prized cows. Killed 1 or 2 yearly, drying 250 slices of meat to last 6 months. Their staple? Bananas, sliced with skin, washed, boiled in coconut milk, tasting like mushy sweet potatoes. Not gourmet, but it kept them alive. They met other stragglers but split up, too risky to group. Onoda rationed food tightly to keep his men lean and sharp. Over 30 years, they launched over 100 attacks, killing about 30 Filipinos, wounding 100. Americans and Filipinos swept the jungles, found camps, but Onoda slipped away, tipped off by birds' alarm calls. In 1949, Japan declared them dead, awarding posthumous honors. In 1950, Akatsu defected, surrendered, and confirmed the war's end. He wrote notes, dropped from planes, but Onoda dismissed them. Japan launched rescue ops. Planes blared surrender calls. Relatives begged via loudspeakers. Onoda thought, "Gas attack coming." They carried wet towels for protection. In 1954, Shimada died in a police shootout, covering their retreat. The Philippines allowed searches, but Onoda saw American ploys. In 1959, Japan again declared them dead, giving them the Order of the Rising Sun, 6th class. Onoda and Kozuka kept waiting for a Japanese invasion, knowing every trail. In 1972, Kozuka was killed in a clash. Onoda was alone, grieving. 2 years later, in 1974, a thrill-seeking student, Norio Suzuki, who dreamed of finding Onoda, plus a yeti and a panda, flew to Lubang. He roamed the jungle, shouting Onoda's name, and it worked. Onoda emerged, and Suzuki explained the war ended 29 years ago. Onoda half believed but said, "No commander's order, no surrender." Suzuki flew to Japan, showed photos, media went nuts. The government tracked down Onoda's old commander, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, now a bookseller, who flew to Lubang on March 9, 1974, and ordered surrender. Onoda bowed, handed over his pristine Arisaka rifle, 500 rounds, grenades, and sword to Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos in a ceremony packed with VIPs and reporters. Marcos pardoned him for the killings. On March 12, 1974, Onoda returned to Japan a hero, parades, an audience with the emperor. But Japan was unrecognizable, consumer culture, anti-war vibes. Some praised his loyalty. Others, especially academics, called him a killer for the Filipino deaths. Onoda realized 29 years were wasted. In April 1975, he moved to Brazil's Japanese community, wrote the bestseller No Surrender, My 30-Year War, 1974, and bought a 1,200-hectare ranch with 1,800 cattle. He married Machi Anaku in 1976. In 1984, he returned to Japan, founding Onoda Nature School, teaching kids survival and discipline, impacting thousands. In the 1990s, he visited Lubang, donating to a school, but some locals never forgave the deaths he caused. He split time between Brazil and Japan, regretting 30 years lost to propaganda, family, career, gone. He died January 16, 2014, in Tokyo from pneumonia at 91. His story inspired films like Onoda, 10,000 Nights in the Jungle, 2021, showing his inner turmoil. Onoda wasn't the last. Teruo Nakamura, a Taiwanese-born Japanese soldier, was found in 1974 on Indonesia's Morotai, hiding 29 years in a palm leaf hut, eating bananas, unaware the war ended. Japan initially denied him a pension since he wasn't ethnic Japanese. Others, like Major Fumio Tanaka, surrendered in 1947 on Peleliu. Groups on Saipan hid in caves into late 1945. Holdout records span 1945 to 1974, with whispers into the 2000s. In 2006, Ishinasuk Uwano surfaced in Ukraine, not a jungle holdout, but a deserter who settled there. Internet memes love these guys. Onoda's still fighting laggy servers in 1974. Or, Yokoi sees a smartphone, CIA gadget. Reddit and TikTok riff on them as dudes, stuck in a lost war. These stories show propaganda's grip. Bushido was both strength and curse. Could this happen now with the internet? Or are we trapped in our own jungles of fake news? If this hit you hard, subscribe, we'll unpack more wild history soon. Got a family story like this? Share it below.